Good and happy Monday to all of you, and welcome into another edition of the JD Sports Show on 12 Ounce Sports. Welcome in, everybody. Another Monday with you here on 12 Ounce Sports. Happy to have you along, whether you're listening on 12 Ounce Sports, Zingo app, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you may be listening or watching. Thank you for joining in today, and welcome in to the JD Sports Show, sponsored by MyBookie and the Fields Golf Course on 12 Ounce Sports. Happy to have you for another Monday, 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern here on 12 Ounce Sports. Well. Another Monday, another bit of controversy with college football. Last week, when we departed at 3 p.m. Eastern time last Monday, it was unknown what the Big Ten, the Pac-12, what every college was going to do for the fall athletic season. And just a little short time after we left the air, it was announced that the Big Ten did officially postpone fall sports, including football, to the spring. So did the Pac-12. So no Big Ten or Pac-12 college football or college sports of any kind this fall. In other conferences, the Big 12, other Power 5 conferences, the Big 12, SEC, and ACC have basically said that they're moving on and they are going to continue the college fall football season. The Big 12 has already come out with their schedule. The SEC is scheduled to come out with their schedule tonight. Still no word, at least that I've seen, from the ACC on their schedule, but expect that to be relative. Actually, they did come out with that revised schedule. I believe that's what they're going to stick with. I had heard that they might change it up, but they did actually technically come out with the schedule before all these other colleges canceled, so they may have to revise it again, because I know that some of the ACC schools had like MAC schools on them, and the Mid-American Conference already canceled, so they're going to probably have to revise that. It looks like what it's going to be is what the Big 12 kind of did is with their schedule, they set it so if there needs to be cancellations or reschedules, they have openings. So there's several, because now that you're only playing a conference schedule, you can kind of expand that out. And so there's several buys or off weeks now where either it will just be a buy or if a game had to be rescheduled because of COVID or something related to that, it can be rescheduled. So I would assume that's how the SEC and ACC will do something similar in that scenario where they leave openings for reschedules and uh, now again, because you're getting rid of 4 or 5 conference games, you can expand the season to give players a little bit more time off. You don't have to cram it all in. With that being said, it's going to be very interesting to see how it works out. If it does, I was asked by somebody when it was announced by the Big Ten, what was my thought? And I just it's so 1 minute I'm kind of in the I think it was the right move, and the next minute it feels like I feel like maybe they could have waited. I had a poll that I put out on my Twitter at the JD Show 12 ounce OZ. Make sure to follow me over on Twitter. I posted a poll saying it was right after my show last week. I said, should college football happen in 2020? I had a poll, and we had 36 votes. Really happy about that. And a little bit to my surprise, 56% said no, 44% said yes. So the majority, by 56%, said no. And again, the question was, should college football happen in 2020? Not will it happen, should it happen? So out of 36 people, 56% thought no, college football should not happen. And again, I've been just so back and forth on this. I said last week on the show, I felt like what Jim Harbaugh, when he came out, head coach of the Michigan Wolverines, came out and said that he felt like they had the safety protocols they had were safer and safe enough for the players. And that made me kind of think, okay, if somebody like that believes that, he said he was pushing football aside. Did he really? I don't know for sure. That's kind of up for debate if he really actually was thinking about safety over wanting to actually play football. But, it seems like a lot of these players, and the other thing is a lot of family members, a lot of parents of these players have come out publicly and said they felt like their child was safe in the football program. And I've even seen some say they felt like they were safer with playing football because they were going to get tested regularly. They were going to be strict. And I think this is the side of it, to me at least, that I feel like I think is where I'm like, yeah, because, those athletes, if they were going to play football, have, if you're a college athlete and you know that you have to do these very strict rules or else you're not going to play and it could hurt your team, that means those kids aren't going to go out, and do, bad things. They aren't going to risk themselves, is what I'm trying to say, for the virus, because they know that they want to play football, and they're also going to be they would have gotten tested more often because they would have. I think they had to do like 2 tests a week, and now that that's kind of gone, at least for Big Ten and Pac-12 and these other schools. I get it though from this other standpoint. So the flip side of that, and I talked about this a little bit last week, and the reason the NCAA I think is really kind of been torn about this, and conferences have as well, is the idea of what if the worst happens, right? What if an athlete gets really sick and something bad happens, and now is the school liable? Is the NCAA liable? All those different things. And obviously, you don't want to ever think of the worst, but you have to keep that in mind when you're setting a precedence and when you're talking about uh, playing football. And I think ultimately the Big Ten and Pac-12 and a lot of these other smaller conferences decided that it was not worth the possible risk. Yes, players might get and again I'm not saying what's right or wrong. I'm just kind of saying what the two sides, the two minds. For players, it's we're actually they believe they're safer because they're going to be getting tested and they're going to be more lockdowns. And the NCAA, their thought is, well, what if? That what if scenario I think really worries the NCAA. So for me personally, I don't know. I mean, 1 minute I see something or read something that makes me go, yeah, I think they should still play. And the next minute it's like, well, I don't know. I guess it's hard for me to sit here and say because I'm not in that scenario. I'm not on the NCAA board. I'm not a college athlete. I never was. Maybe if I was, I would have a better understanding or idea of how that would be. But when a lot of these players are coming out, and especially, I think what struck me, because players can say what they want to play, right? I mean, that you can kind of take that with a grain of salt. But I think what struck me is when I saw parents coming out and saying that, and to me it was just like wow, if a player, or if coaches are coming, or excuse me, if parents are coming out and saying they actually feel safe with their kid playing, then that's pretty big to me. The Big Ten was kind of stuck because they had two big scenarios that I believe kind of swayed their thought process, right? So uh, I think they had two big situations that uh, might have swayed their decision making and canceling. The Pac-12. Before I get to the Big Ten, I think the really big reason the Pac-12 did is remember they had that kind of player union come out, and the player union basically said we want all these guidelines to be met, um, or we're not going to play football. And I think that was really big for the Pac-12. I think that was really big for the Pac-12 to kind of just. I think that went into their decision a lot uh, because they knew that, and it goes back to that idea of the like how liable are these schools and conferences and the NCAA if something happens. So I think the Pac-12 was kind of really put. I think their backs were really put against the wall, and when that kind of small union came out and said we want all these demands met, and we're not going to play this year, and I really think that was a huge factor for them. Now for the Big Ten, I think there was two things, two situations that were I think really big in the determining factor that the Big Ten came down to. So if you don't know about these that happened, I'll just give you a little background and situation. So the first one was the outbreak that happened at Rutgers University, which Rutgers is a school in the Big Ten. So the Rutgers apparently there was a party that happened and an outbreak happened, and 15 players on the Rutgers team tested positive for COVID-19. And they had to shut down everything at Rutgers. They had to shut down the university. They had to shut down team practices and team facilities. I mean, they had to really kind of just shut everything down because that was 15 players themselves. There was actually 125 cases from that party. That party created 125 new COVID cases, and 15 of them were from the football team. And I think that was back in June, middle of June. And I think that when I remember when that happened, that was really when stuff was starting to players were starting to get back to campus and kids were getting back to campus, and it was the first real big thing. And I remember going, "There's no way football is going to happen because we're like a week into this and we've already had an outbreak happen." And I think the Big Ten really took that to heart because that was in their conference. The Big Ten, Rutgers is in the Big Ten. So I imagine and they said, the Big Ten basically came out and said, the reason they didn't feel comfortable moving is, yes, there are some schools who probably have safety protocols that will work. I think they said 6 or 7 schools, but there are some schools they didn't feel comfortable with. And this right here is, I think, a big reason for their mindset. They felt like there are some schools that, like Michigan, probably Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn State, the bigger schools, Wisconsin, Iowa, they said that they felt, sure, we had 5 or 6 schools, but they felt like there was 5 or 6 schools they didn't feel comfortable with. And I think this accident that happened back in June with Rutgers was a big part of that factor of they didn't feel like every school had the guidelines and the protocols to be safe enough. And what happened to Rutgers and the party and 125 cases and 15 football players, I right off the bang, and like I said, I mean, immediately when it happened, I went, I mean, the worst thing that could happen is within the first week or so of players returning and having that outbreak, and that's what happened with Rutgers. Now, obviously, they weren't safe, right? They went to this party, and that was a poor decision. But the problem is, and this goes back to again being, again, I'm not on either side, but just going back to what the NCAA mindset would be, they're going there thinking, okay, if they're going to do it, how do we know everybody else won't do it, right? How do we know that these other kids won't go out and do risk factors, whether it be parties or just even going out with a bunch of friends or whatever the case may be. Yes, there might be a vast majority of players who will follow those guidelines, but the problem is, even if a couple don't, then an outbreak can occur, and that's where that old saying, right? Like, somebody always has to ruin the fun for everybody else. And I really think that what happened here with Rutgers, was a huge, huge factor in the Big Ten canceling their season because it happened in their conference. The other thing that happened in the Big Ten conference was Brady Freeney from Iowa, or excuse me, from Indiana. If you haven't heard about this, crazy story. So Brady Freeney, an offensive lineman for Indiana, freshman lineman for Indiana, tested positive for COVID-19, and he got it really bad. And I'm not sitting here trying to scare anybody, or I'm not doing propaganda. I'm just talking about the football player. His mom said that he basically went through hell for about 14 days with the virus, and they had more positive tests than Brady, but he was the one that got the worst one. And the thing about this is it showed, again, I don't want to get too into this, but it basically showed that a healthy player, because his mom said that he's never had any problem, health issues or anything like that, can get it. And that's not to fearmonger. That basically, I think it's pretty safe to say that yeah, I mean, COVID-19. The scary thing about it is you can have no symptoms, but this guy can go to the hospital for it. But you can both be healthy, and I think what happened to Brady shows that you just never know, right? Anybody can get these bad symptoms. It's kind of odd how random it seems, that some people can get it really bad, and somebody can get it nothing for it. For example, with NASCAR, Jimmy Johnson, had it, but he had no symptoms, and he's back in a week. That can happen, but with Brady, this young man Brady Freeney, it didn't happen. And I think this line, this comment that she said, because she was interviewed about it. This is and so between the Rutgers situation and the Brady Freeney situation happening in the Big Ten, and this quote that she said, I think, was probably pretty impactful as well. A quote his mother said, "Bottom line, even if your son's schools do everything right to protect them, they can't protect them." That's Debbie Rucker. That's the mom. That's what she said. Again, bottom line, even if your son's schools do everything right to protect them, they can't protect them. And I think that, going back to again what Jim Harbaugh said about he felt like all the protocols were right, I think that he probably is right. I think Michigan probably does have great protocols. It's a big school, very well funded. But can these other schools like Rutgers and Indiana, who are still good schools, but they're in the Big Ten, but maybe don't have as well as protocols, could they get past it? So I think between that situation, the Rutgers situation happening in the backyard of the Big Ten, was huge factors for the Big Ten to say, and like they said, we just didn't feel comfortable with everybody playing. We didn't feel like everybody could follow those protocols. Some could, probably most even, but not everyone. And again, I'm not trying to sway anybody to one side, because I really truly see both sides. And again, I feel feel for the athletes who are not going to get to play. And even if they, Urban Meyer, who former coach for Ohio State, college football analyst on Fox, said there's no chance a spring season can happen. So, because, and I mentioned this last week, those top athletes, that's the time where they're getting ready for the NFL is in the spring. So it's going to be impossible for them to play college football when they're trying to get ready for the NFL, and they won't. I mean, I would assume most of the top guys who know they're going to get drafted, especially higher round guys, would probably opt out for the spring season because they're going to be trying to get ready for the NFL season. And I know that some people have said that if they're going to do a spring season, it has to start in January because then you could do it in January and get done in time for those guys to go to the pros. Well, guys, in Michigan and Ohio and Wisconsin and Minnesota, it is not warm in January. It's unplayable. Now, I did see that they talked about a bubble system that I actually think is kind of intriguing where you would do indoor stadiums in the Midwest. So Minnesota, where the Vikings play, is one. The Colts, Indianapolis, which is actually home of the Big Ten Championship, that's an indoor venue. Ford Field, where Detroit, where the Lions play. So you could have indoor stadiums and you could do bubble systems for close range teams. So, the close teams to Detroit would go there, Minneapolis, and Indianapolis, Minnesota, Indianapolis would go there. So that could work if you wanted to do the January approach. But to me, if you're going to do that, I think you should have just done college football in the fall because, we're not probably going to be a whole lot different in January than we are right now. I mean, again, we have no idea when a vaccine may come out. It may not come out till next spring. So really at that point, you're doing the same thing you could have done now or in the fall if you wanted to do some sort of bubble system, which I think, again, I mentioned it last week, it would be pretty much impossible for college football to do a bubble system because you can't really keep amateur athletes in one place and not let them leave. That's illegal, literally illegal for amateur athletes to do that without being compensated. Plus, I mean, let's be honest, it would just be impossible because these kids are also going to school. So, I mean, it would be almost impossible to do. So I understood why they couldn't do the bubble system, but so I don't know how that would change in January. Although, yes, it sounds great, and they could have done that now. I just don't know how it would have worked. I think it will be really interesting. I think the Big Ten and Pac-12 really are going to be, kind of in that scenario where obviously they're not going to want college football to fail this fall. But if the SEC and the Big 12 and the ACC play football this fall and it goes over well, that's going to be a really, really bad look for the Big Ten and the Pac-12. And I get it. I'm not trying to say that you should not put safety first because, I've been a big proponent of safety first. But I'm meaning more so for the outside view of future athletes, future players of these schools who, and current players of these schools. If you're a junior or sophomore and you watch college football work out perfectly well and you have a season where you couldn't play because your conference, but on the other side, if college football fails this fall, then yeah, the Big Ten and Pac-12 are going to look pretty smart. I'm not rooting for it to fail. Obviously, I want football. It looks like everything's going pretty well for National Football League. Again, with the pros, it's a lot different than collegiate because there's so many more guidelines and rules with Title IX and amateur sports you have to follow with college. With pros, obviously you're getting paid and you can. So I believe the NFL will happen. I think we're going to be okay there, which is good. At least we'll get some sort of football. College football, I think it's going to have to be played by ear. I think they're going to try. I think we're going to see these conferences try. The question will be, will it work? And obviously we're not going to know if it's going to work or not until we get to this fall and get playing. What happens if a team gets an outbreak, all these kinds of things that these other sports, NBA and MLB and NHL have had to kind of figure out what happens, what if scenarios. With MLB, we've seen the Marlins and the Cardinals have outbreak situations that they've handled pretty well. So what will happen if that happens in college football? It's just going to be weird, man. It's going to be very weird without without my Big Ten football and with very limited college football. Obviously, excuse me. I hope it works out for those schools because I want college football, but also I know how hard those young men and coaches work all year round for that sport. A lot of those guys are hoping to do that for their future. So I hope it works out for them. Uh, I know the Big Ten and Pac-12 are going to be watching closely. If they do a spring season, it's going to be very weird. I know Mark Emmert, the president of the NCAA, said that college football can still have a national title, but every other fall sport cannot. So there cannot be a national championship in all fall sports except for football. So technically, there's still, as long as we get through the college football season, there will be a national champion between three conferences. Of course, some of the big favorites are in those conferences: Alabama, LSU, Clemson, Oklahoma. Some of the big, so they'll still be there, but obviously, probably some of the other big favorites: Penn State, Ohio State, and the Big Ten, Oregon, in the Pac-12 are now out. I also, and I know we're a long way from this. If the season does happen, the next question is what are they going to do for bowl games? Will that happen? Will there just be a playoff and a championship? Lots to figure out in the future. Shout out to the official theme song of the JD Sports Show. It is Odyssey by Scorch featuring Austin Tenick. Head over to SoundCloud now to search Scorch, the official theme song Odyssey for the JD Sports Show. Shout out to Scorch and Austin Tenick for that. Thanks to our sponsor, The Fields Golf Course. Make sure to visit their website, thefieldsgolfcourse.com, now to book a tee time and for future availabilities. The Fields Golf Course, located in Ithaca, Michigan. Just want to take a moment to tell you all about 12 Ounce Sports. Now that the action is officially back, 12 Ounce Sports is your home for the best live talk shows covering all aspects of the sporting world and live game broadcast. With Zingo TV adding 12 Ounce Sports to their long list of channels, you can now catch my show, the JD Sports Show, and all other shows on the Zingo TV channel 761. All you got to do is download Zingo TV and use the promo code 120Z 12 ounce when signing up. It's that simple. Be sure to check out our latest blogs and podcasts as well on 12ouncesportsradio.com. Sports are in full swing. I want to help you take advantage of those sports investments when getting in on the action. 12 Ounce Sports has officially partnered with MyBookie to get you the best deal possible. When you sign up on mybookie.ag, they'll match your first deposit up to $1,000 when you punch in the promo code 12 Ounce Sports. That's 12 Ounce Sports when signing up on mybookie.ag to get your deposit matched up to $1,000. Sounds like a good time to go do that. If you're talking about NBA playoffs, and let's get to our next topic. The NBA playoffs are underway. I know I'm doing this prediction show a little bit into it, but I only have a show on Monday, so I can only do what I can do. So let's go through each matchup and let's predict a 2020 NBA bubble champion. Let's start with the Western Conference, which I think is going to be a little bit easier to go through than the Eastern Conference, in my opinion. So the Western Conference, the Lakers are the 1 seed at 52-19. I don't think there's any doubt in many people's mind that they are the favorites to win it all and the favorites to win the West. But let's just kind of go through. They're going to face the 8 seed Trailblazers, who, with Damian Lillard and crew, came on a tear at the end of the bubble there and snuck their way into the playoffs, knocking out the Grizzlies and Ja Morant. So the Trailblazers, led by Damian Lillard, will be facing the Lakers. Unfortunately, I don't see that being well for the Blazers. I'm going to take the Lakers to win that one. We have the Rockets and the Oklahoma City Thunder, which is the 4 and 5 seed. I think this is the most intriguing first-round matchup in the West. not just because it's 4 and 5 seed, but of course you have Chris Paul returning to face his old Rockets team, and then you have Russell Westbrook, the former Thunder point guard, coming back to. So just so many interesting matchups. One moment I was very you could really flip a coin, I think, but I'm going to take the Rockets. I think I'll take James Harden and Westbrook. I think the Thunder will put up a good matchup. I think this is going to be the best matchup in the West, maybe in the entire first round, outside of one other matchup that I'll get to later. But I like the Rockets. So now let's go down to the Nuggets and the Jazz. The Nuggets are the 3 seed. The Jazz are the 6 seed. I love Donovan Mitchell. I think he's one of the more exciting players, but I like Jokic more, and I like the Nuggets more. I think the Nuggets are very underrated. I think that they were hurt a little bit. I think they were really good, and I think they're still good, but I think they didn't benefit from the bubble, and I think it hurt a lot of higher teams. But they had good runs and good seasons, but specifically the Bucks. But I like the Nuggets to advance there. So the bottom matchup of there is the Clippers and the Mavs. Now, even though it is 2 versus 7, the Clippers are the 2 seed, 49 and 23. The Mavericks are the 7 seed at 43 and 32. Luka Doncic is, I think, maybe a top 3 most exciting player to watch in basketball right now. He is so fun to watch. I mean, I don't watch a ton of basketball, but when I do, I love watching Luka. He is such a fun player to watch. I mean, by himself, I could just watch him play. I mean, again, I think he's one of the top 3 or 4 most exciting players to watch in basketball. However, they are running into the newly formed big Clipper team led by former NBA champion and NBA final MVP Kawhi Leonard, who is just such a good player. I mean, does everything so well: offense, defense. Kawhi. One thing he has done is seemingly always, especially lately, and especially with that run with the Raptors, just was so clutch when they needed him to be clutch. I think the Clippers, I think this is a tough matchup for the fact that I think Luka and the Mavericks are a good 7 seed. I think that they match up well. I think Luka's a really good player. Again, a top 5 or 4 players in the league. And I think Kawhi Leonard is going to probably match up against Luka, which is going to be such a fun matchup to watch. And I think that's probably advantage Kawhi with the experience in the defense, but still fun. So I'm gonna go Clippers there. So we have the West complete. Let's just keep going to the West till we get the Western Conference champions. So now we have the Lakers and the Rockets. I just don't think. I think the Lakers got a good match here. I think the Trailblazers are pretty good. I think they'll win that first round, but I don't see the Rockets matching up very well. Unless James Harden and Russell Westbrook both combine for 50 points each, the Lakers will win that one and go to the Western Conference Final. In the other side, so you have the Nuggets and the Clippers, and I love this matchup. I want to pick Nuggets just because I think it would be so interesting to see the Nuggets have a chance at the Lakers. But it's just, man, I just can't get over Kawhi. I said Clippers, Lakers at the beginning of the year in the Western Conference Finals. I'm going to stick to that. I'm going to say Lakers, Clippers in the Western Conference Finals. And I have to go Lakers. I know it's an easy pick, but to me, I just like the Lakers a lot. It's hard not to when you have one of the best players in the world, LeBron James. You add Anthony Davis. They don't even need much after that, but they do. They have some depth. I like the Lakers to make it to the championship, to the NBA Finals, and I'll take them over the Clippers in 6 games. I think this series will be good. I think the Clippers will win a couple of games. I think they'll do it in 6. So let's go to the East. We have the Bucks, the 1 seed matching up against the 8 seed Magic. Even though, and you'll see why. The Bucks have stuttered so much in the bubble. They have looked really off. Nobody was hurt more by the bubble than the Bucks. I think the Bucks would have been a for sure shoe into the NBA Finals. I'm not so sure anymore. The bubble. I mean, they might just be kind of relaxing and laying back a little bit. I don't know, but what I've seen so far from the Bucks since they've returned has not been real good. I'll take them obviously over the Magic, but I don't know. So I talked about the Rockets and the Thunder being maybe the best matchup. This is the other one, the Pacers and the Heat, the other 4 and 5 matchup. I've been kind of going back and forth on this one. I love the Miami Heat style play. I think they have great depth. Duncan Robinson, the former Wolverine, has been a stud for the Miami Heat. I'm going Heat. I think that they're even gonna. Well, I'll get to that later. I'll go Heat. So let's go down to the Celtics, who are the 3 seed, and the 76ers, who are the 6 seed. A lot of people thought the 76ers and Bucks were probably the 2 favorites in the East. And, the 76ers just really did not perform to what I think many people expected them. I mean, they're the 6 seed. A lot of people expected them to be the 2 seed, maybe even the 1 at the start of the year. I never trusted them. I never trusted Joel Embiid or Ben Simmons, their health or their play style. Just something is off. I'm going to go Celtics, who I like, by the way. I think the Celtics are a very underrated 3 seed. I like the Celtics a lot. I'm going to go Celtics over Sixers. Raptors and Nets. How about the Raptors? Man, everybody thought they lose Kawhi Leonard, it's over, right? All hell is broken loose. And the Raptors, man, I think they might be. They're not as good, right, as they were when they won the championship. And that's just unfair to say because they lost some players, and Kawhi Leonard is one of the best. But Lowry and Siakam and Van Fleet and Gasol and Ibaka has been a nice get. And I just something about this team. They just find ways to win and beat good teams a lot. I like the Raptors to win. By the way, the Nets. It'll be interesting to see what happens to them next year if they do get KD, Kevin Durant back, and Kyrie. If that duo can stay healthy, Nets might be in the top 3 seeding next year in the East. So we have Bucks and Heat, and I'll tell you what. Before the bubble, I would have said Bucks. I think Bucks Lakers would have been the easiest matchup, but I think the Heat are going to pose a really big threat to the Bucks. I think the Bucks are going to win that and get to the Eastern Conference Finals. But man, the Miami Heat are going to push the Bucks to the limit. Maybe 7 games. I would not be shocked at all because I like the Heat. I love the way they've been playing down the stretch, but more so, I don't like the way the Bucks have been playing. And I think that's a bad matchup when you're talking about a team that's been hot versus a team that's been cold. I'll still take the Bucks, though. I think they're going to figure things out enough to get to that point. So then you have Raptors, Celtics. I like the Raptors a lot, man. I'm going all out, and that's why I'm taking the Raptors to win the East. Yes, you heard it here first on the JD Sports Show on 12 Ounce Sports. I am picking the Toronto Raptors to beat the Milwaukee Bucks in the Eastern Conference Finals. I'm going Lakers, Raptors in the NBA Finals, the bubble finals. I know it. I know that's not the popular pick, but again, I've said it before. I'll say it again. Something about these Raptors, the way they play, they have guts. And I do not like the way the Bucks have been playing. I think the Bucks will get to the Eastern Conference Finals. I think it'll go 7 games. But I'm taking the Toronto Raptors to get to the NBA Finals to face the LA Lakers. Now that gets us to that matchup. That gets us to the NBA Championship matchup. The Lakers and the Raptors. I think this matchup on paper, and maybe when you look at it just from the outside, might be advantage Lakers in every aspect. But I think the Toronto Raptors are going to put up a fight. I think the Lakers will win in 6. But I think the Toronto Raptors are going to win a couple games. They're going to make the Lakers work for it. This is not going to be a walkthrough championship. I think the Raptors, after they beat the Milwaukee Bucks, are going to have a lot of momentum coming out of the Eastern Conference Finals. And the Raptors are going to make it look real close and real good. And they're going to play real well. I like the Raptors a lot. They're going to get to 6 games. But the Lakers just have too much. And that's not anybody's fault. I just think the Lakers have too much. It was pretty much destined before the bubble and even during the bubble that the Lakers, unless something unfortunate happens with injury or something to the Lakers, I just don't see them not winning the championship. Again, I think they'll have a couple of competitions. I think, I think the Blazers will give them a nice series. I think the Clippers will give them a really good series, and I think the Raptors will give them a really good series. They could have two series go 7 games, but the Lakers just have too much firepower for me, and I think I've thought about it, and I said, could I really pick the Raptors? And part of me said yes, and then I just looked at the matchup, and I just don't think I can reasonably say that the Lakers can be beaten. So I have the LA Lakers beating the Toronto Raptors in 6 games in the NBA championship. What do you think? What do you think? Tweet at me on Twitter. Comment on Facebook who you think. I'm going to have a poll on Twitter after I end the show today about who you think will win the NBA championship this year. We'll be interested to see if you think it'll be the Lakers, Raptors, somebody else. Be interested to see who you guys got. I'm taking the I'm taking the Lakers in 6. Last week I may or may not have predicted that the Detroit Tigers were going to make the 2020 playoffs. And last week when I said that, they were on a roll. Man, they were 9-5. The pitching wasn't great, but as I mentioned, I figured they'd get that turned around. The offense was doing really well, and then apparently they heard me because I jinxed it all to hell. Since then, I don't know if they have. They won a couple games, but it seems like they haven't won a game. They just got swept out of town by the Indians this weekend. Their pitching has been even more horrendous since we last talked. Matthew Boyd, so disappointing. I mean, what a great 2019 he had, at least for the first half of the season, and it's still really an overall good year. And just having a terrible, terrible year this year. I mean, the guy, either strikes them out or gives up home runs. I mean, that's just what he does. He's that kind of a pitcher. He's got good stuff. I feel like he just, if he could figure it out, he'd be a really good number 2 or 3 in a rotation. But right now he's a 4 or 5. And that's just what it is. I like him a lot. He's a really good person outside of baseball. Again, I think he could and can be a really good pitcher. We saw sprinkles of that last year, but he's just been off. And, maybe it's because of everything that's happened. I don't want to write him off, but it's been frustrating to see how off he's been this year. And then C.J. Cron, the everyday first baseman for the Tigers, has to have season-ending knee surgery, who had a great summer camp, spring training 2.0, and was having a pretty decent start to the season, really good power bat, and an everyday first baseman, good defensive first baseman as well, and that went away. So that 2020, I'm not going to come on here and say that it's over. I think they'll figure things out. And I'll tell you what, the news that was shared just 15 minutes before I came on the air today on 12 Ounce Sports is the best news and the most exciting news that and I'm sure many other Tiger fans have had since, 5 or 6 years ago now. Since we last made the postseason, maybe. Or maybe since the day we drafted these kids. But 3 big prospects are headed to the Motor City. They've been called up. The 2018 number 1 overall pick, number 2 prospect in their system, number 8 in baseball, Casey Mize, is coming up. Finally, Casey Mize is going to make his major league debut this week. And he's coming up. So watch out. He's going to make his debut on Wednesday. Matthew Boyd pitches tonight. Then the other guy they called up, who will make his first start tomorrow, Tuesday, Tarik Skubal, number 50 prospect in baseball. The left-handed, hard-throwing, tall Skubal will make his start Tuesday. So the rotation that has been absolutely poor outside of Spencer Turnbull, who has been pretty good this year. I've been very impressed with Turnbull. Gets some much needed help, including two guys that all Tiger fans have been wanting to see since we heard of them. And since the day we drafted Mize, he's been wanting to get up. Casey Mize and Skubal. But that's not all. Isaac Paredes, the number 6 prospect in the Tigers farm system and just outside of the top 100 infield prospect bat, is also going to get called up. So two huge pitching prospect in Skubal and Mize, and then hitting prospect Isaac Paredes are getting called up to the big leagues. And that is, regardless of what happens this season, I'm excited as a Tiger fan to see those three guys. Hopefully we'll see Matt Manning soon. Hopefully we'll get to see Riley Green and Torkelson within the next couple of years. Daz Cameron, some of the other bats as well. Joey Wentz, a good top pitching prospect. He had Tommy John surgery, so it might be a couple of years before we see him. But that's another guy I'm excited about. Man, it's nice to finally see some of these big names. Now, obviously, we don't know what's going to happen, right? I mean, they still have to pitch, but just the fact that we finally get to see, again, Skubal will start Tuesday in Chicago, and Mize will start Wednesday in Chicago. Boyd will go tonight, Turnbull on Thursday. Don't know when Paredes will make his debut. Not sure if it'll be tonight or if he will sit a couple days and watch. He's an infielder, can play short, third, second. And so they DFA'd, which means designated for assignment, Dawel Lugo. So he has to clear waivers to be outrighted to Toledo, or he can be picked up by another team. And Paredes is interesting. You know, a lot of people probably don't remember where we got. So Skubal, by the way, Skubal was an 11th round pick. And that's gem. You know, every once in a while, teams will find those late round draft picks that turn into stars. Tarik Skubal could be one for the Tigers. An 11th round pick who's a top 50 prospect in baseball and could turn into a star. That could be the next late round stud that they show up on the graphics for years to come. Of course, Casey Mize was number 1 overall in 2018. But a lot of people, might not know where Isaac Paredes came from. He was not drafted by the Tigers. He was actually drafted by the Chicago Cubs. Actually, not drafted by the Chicago Cubs, excuse me. He was signed out of Mexico by the Cubs, international signing. So you might be going, okay, so how did we get Isaac Paredes, or how did the Tigers get Isaac Paredes? Well, I think quietly one of the best deals Al Avila made trade-wise was this trade. And at the time, everybody was more excited about the other guy, which is still a good part of it, but I was actually pretty excited about Isaac Paredes. So this is the deal. So back in 2017, obviously the Tigers were, in rebuild mode, and the Cubs were looking for a World Series, and they needed some help. So we had two guys named Justin Wilson, the relief pitcher, and catcher Alex Avila, which is Al Avila's son, get sent to Chicago. And back to us is how many people of you know how Jeimer Candelario, who is the Tigers' everyday, or pretty much everyday third baseman now, came to be. And at the time, Candelario was a top 100 prospect in baseball, but little did people know that, and he wasn't really well known in the deal because everybody wanted to talk about Candelario because he was a top 100 prospect, was this 19-year-old out of Mexico named Isaac Paredes. And I remember looking at that deal, and I remember how many people went, the Cubs just got robbed. And I go, yeah, I mean, that looks like a pretty good deal. I mean, obviously Justin Wilson and Alex Avila were just rentals. So to get a top 100 prospect back at the time, you're thinking, okay, that's pretty cool. But they're going, no, not because of Candelario, because of Paredes. And I went, okay. So I really did some digging on this young man. And I remember watching some of his stuff and reading scouting reports on him because I was very interested. And I was just like, wait. Am I reading this right? Like, this is I remember reading the scouting reports, and they were talking about how, of course, he was only 19 when he got traded, and the ceiling was super high for this kid. And I remember a Cubs reporter was talking about, like, he's like, I don't understand the trade at all. He's like, not because of Candelario. He understood, like, maybe that, but he's like, how in the world could we get rid of Candelario and Paredes for 2 rentals? And it's just funny to me because everybody really wanted to talk about Paredes, but then the baseball gurus and Cubs people were like, no, Candelario is good, but but Paredes was the real big steal of that deal. And of course, Alex Wilson and Justin Wilson and Alex Avila didn't re-sign with the Cubs, so they only got him from half the season. And now we have Candelario, our everyday third baseman, and we might have found another future everyday infielder in Paredes from that same deal. Again, I think that might be the best or one of the best deals that Al Avila made since being general manager trade-wise. I think he's been pretty bad at trading. I think he's been really good at drafting. I think Al Avila has killed it in the draft department. Trading, though, by the way, Dawel Lugo, who got DFA, yeah, he was part of that JD Martinez deal. The trading was pretty poor. I've said it time and time again. I thought Al Avila did a pretty poor job of trading outside of a couple of deals, this being one of them, the Paredes and Candelario deal from the Cubs. The other one being Leonys Martin to Cleveland for Willie Castro, who's an everyday player or going to be. He's up right now at the big league club. Martin was just backup outfielder that the Indians needed for depth. He ended up only playing a few games. He got that terrible illness and wasn't able to play the rest of the year. And we got this young stud infielder named Willie Castro from that deal. So a couple of deals have worked out. And obviously, when you make a lot of trades, not everything is going to work out. It's impossible for that to happen. But that was a big deal to get Paredes and to get Candelario. I'm so excited that finally we get to see some of these kids on the big stage. Mize, Skubal, now Paredes. I don't think we'll see Riley Green this year. Maybe next year. Torkelson, I would assume next year at some point, maybe next summer. If we have a normal season again next year, probably by midsummer we'll see him. But so a lot of bright stars in the future for the Tigers. I know days and games are grim right now, especially after such a great start. But hopefully these young kids can give a little bit more hope into the future. Hopefully they can have some good starts this week. Hopefully Paredes can hit bombs like he has done in the minor leagues. And we have a lot more young guys that are still down there, and we'll get here eventually as well, that certainly Tiger fans and baseball fans should be excited for. I'm excited for Casey Mize and Skubal, no doubt about it. I think maybe to me that I would say that is down in the minors that I'm most excited for that still hasn't come up outside of Matt Manning, because I think it's a little unfair because he's rated, and maybe Torkelson and Riley Green. Outside of the guys who are rated and top 100, a guy that I'm excited for that I think will eventually be a really good star is Parker Meadows, young outfield prospect for the Tigers. He was drafted in the second round in that same draft as Casey Mize back in 2018. He is the younger brother of Austin Meadows, who is a really good big league player for the Tampa Bay Rays. I think Parker Meadows was 18 when he was drafted. He was drafted out of high school by the Tigers. I think he's going to be somebody who's going to be really exciting to watch as he continues to grow. He's still got a little bit of work to do with the offensive side of things. He has definitely done better work with the defense. Defense is not really an issue. But, man, it's just exciting times. Man, finally some exciting times for Tiger fans. And, sorry, Mike cut out there for a little bit. And exciting times that I think all Tiger fans can be excited for, knowing that finally some of these pieces that we've been waiting for, that we've been rebuilding for, that we've been at the bottom of the barrel for 5 or 6 years for, are finally coming to fruition. Honestly, now that, if the Tigers, if they really start to stumble over these next couple of weeks, at that point I hope that they just kind of do that the rest of the year so we can get a good draft pick. I don't want them to be teetering. But again, with the expanded playoffs being 8 and 8, 8 teams from each league, the American League, National League, they're still definitely in it. They just got to turn it around. The problem is they're going to face the Indians, who they have lost 20 games in a row to, a lot more. They're going to face the Twins, who are one of the best teams in baseball more. They're going to face the White Sox, who are a really good team, a lot more. And the only team that they're going to match up well against that they're going to face more is the Royals. They also will have to play the Cardinals at some point. They're going to have to play the Cubs, who have the best record in baseball. They're going to have to play I think they were going to play the Reds again. No, they actually did their 2 series against the Reds, so they don't play the Reds again. But so their schedule is really rough, especially with how the Cubs have been playing. The Twins have been playing. Indians, they can't beat the Indians again. They lost 20 in a row to Cleveland. So man, but again, future is more exciting now for the Tigers with Casey Mize and Skubal and Paredes up. More to come. Definitely looking forward to that. I want to thank everybody for listening to the show again here today, the JD Sports Show. Again, make sure to go follow me over on Twitter, at the JD Show 12OZ. Like me on Facebook, the JD Sports Show. Make sure to follow and like 12 Ounce Sports on Twitter and Facebook as well, and the Fields Golf Course. Remember to get your deposit on mybookie.ag. Thank you to everybody for listening again today here on the JD Sports Show. We'll see you again next Monday. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your week.
Don't ever let somebody tell you can't do something. You got a dream, you got to protect it. People can't do something themselves. They want to tell you can't do it. You want something, go get it. Period.